So it is week 12 in JavaScript. And in this week, I want to start with talking about some really important concepts of scheduling because week 12, right? Week 18, which means basically, and really it's week 17 as far as when you can do your technical interview, right? So we're heading into that really crunch time. Now, we're not there yet, and it is a really good time to think about, sorry, really good time to think about getting on the list. Now, many of you, several of you are already on that list, but remember, if you when I went over the video talking about I have 3 classes going through technical interviews, and so what that means is that the volume is something I knew would be a challenge. But where I'm at today on week 12 is that I really wish I had seen more people sign up. Now, I tried to give you an incentive, and the incentive was if you scheduled that date from whenever you scheduled it, then that would be the content that would be available for your technical interview. So, this is still true, right? So, we're coming into this week a really change of where our focus is as far as what we're learning. Now we continue the development process for the decision app, and you're going to still have a coding discussion. In this week, it's not the carbon footprint; it's actually changing directions and doing something with the workout app concept. But in this sense, we're starting a topic, right? Because we've been writing asynchronous code for the most part, code that runs one line after the other, except for when we have callbacks like we do on a for each, and when we have event listeners. Those things, callbacks, happen right when you do something and then it calls back and it does something else. But in this way, the sequential nature of the code is changing because we're going to do async, where we ask JavaScript to do something. It's going to take time for it to do it, and it's going to then continue operating our code, but actually handling that request when it comes back if we write it correctly. And this is where we're changing to writing asynchronous code. So it's a really good time to start thinking about locking in your date. I guess that's if I could bring it back to where I started. Now, in that vein, and this video is, of course, going out in week 12, but in real time, I actually am recording it on Wednesday of week 11. And I found out last night, for those of you, and I get reports, there's been a couple of you reaching out to Zach, our tutor for this class, which, by the way, if you don't know, you go up into syllabus and you'll see the link there to show Zach's schedule. But there's been a little bit of a challenge in his hours related to from this point of the week, okay, week 11, until next week that he's not available. And Zach and I met last night, and actually, Denson, who is in our class, posted a link out to the Clovis tutorial center that could also help as well. So I'm going to actually copy this video out to our Discord just because I think the sooner we get it out, the better. But in this vein, Zach and I met, who's the tutor. Zach and I met yesterday, and I actually had him go through the technical interview. And we talked about the approaches, and he's like, yeah, he's like, that's a good test. Is it a challenge? Yeah, right. It's not meant to be necessarily easy, but what happens is in this test, it covers the basics. And sometimes what happens is that we've moved on to other concepts, but making sure you have those fundamentals is really important. So in that process, what we did is I went through, remember these interactive chat assignments. So what I've done is I've modified the interactive chat assignment that I had originally set up for good practice, and I've narrowed its focus. Okay, and I've provided a link here in week 12, but I want you to know, like it's in here, you'll see it. But also it's here in assignments. I've also published this to where now you can see it. And when you come into assignments, I think the default view you have is this, but if not, you may get an option over here. But for me, the way I have it listed, or you could look for it, it's called good practice. So remember the idea here, and this is there's 3 steps to this process, right? So what I've done again is I've narrowed these topics down, right, to where it'll go through and help you, with either concepts or simple coding examples here. And then it'll talk about functions, creating references, keys and values and objects, how to loop over an array of objects, simple updates to the DOM, and then here. So remember, the way this works is you come in here, you give it your ID number, right? And by the way, it is really good if you also, this helps us who have created this product, is actually to submit it, okay? Not just to come in here and go through it, but let's get started. All right, so the first is going to ask me about const and let. So then it'll ask me about the next one and the next one. And then I can say, once I finish those topics, I can say continue learning. Once I finish those topics, then I can go to the code challenge and then I get to submit. Now, this is not a graded assignment, okay? This is not a graded assignment, but it is something that really should, do you go through it a couple times, should help you prepare for the technical interview, okay? So I wanted to, and again, if you're on Discord, you'll see me talk about this as well. So now let's actually go in. Actually, I'm going to stay here for a second because the thing that's going to be different this week is that I'm going to actually fix something regarding the way we iterate over the object in the array because of something I learned in a past semester, and I did a heads up about it at some point. But I'm going to do that, and then what you're going to do is actually watch and code along with one of my favorite YouTubers, Color Code. And he is going to really start talking about this concept of understanding, synchronous code that we've been writing and then how it compares to asynchronous code. We're going to have his videos for, I think, the next 3 or 4 weeks. And then we'll take the concepts that we're learning and we'll take it into a code discussion, right? So, and then of course, like I had before, and again, I mentioned this last week as far as the way you get the points, or most of them, is if you're watching the solution, but really do attempt this on your own. And then we have the step 4 of the decision app. So if I go into week 12, you can see that I've talked about, now the week. Oh yeah, so that's the other thing I wanted to say is that because the technical interviews, the schedule that I put out, which is listed in our course listing, right, in week 10, that if you remember, I talked about that those are during my office hours. And so if you need to see me, one of the things you might consider is looking at that schedule to see if I have somebody during that time. And if I don't, you, of course, come on in. But if I do and you want to meet with me, just reach out to me and give me a little heads up that says, hey, I'd like to meet with you today. I see you have technical interviews. Could we arrange a time? And you'll hear me probably say maybe before or maybe right after my interviews. But again, I'm willing to be as flexible as I can be. The more heads up I have, the more flexibility I can provide. Okay, so there's a link to that good practice. And then there's the week 11 code solution. So make sure you're starting with good code, which, by the way, it is part of the code alongs, and you've already seen this for those of you that run into it, is that I look at your commits. I actually pull your code into my system. I run your code to see if it works. And if it doesn't work, I'll generally give you, hey, this is not working. At least I show you. And you should, and I guess this is I hate to use the word should, but you need to make sure you have working code, right? That's part of these code alongs, because not only is it important that you code along and get that experience, but also you learn to troubleshoot. And if you need help, with something, this is why, again, Zach will be back. By the time many of you see this, he will probably been back because he's coming back November 1st. But again, right, reach out for help because you want to have working code there. So then here's a link to that good practice. Here's the code solution, right? Set up and commit that. And then here's I went over the decision step 4. And Zach and I talked about, because he was saying it really is great. He said the way I've set up the course. And of course, I love hearing that. But in this sense, he said, because it really, this decision app makes you go back and learn these fundamentals, like starting from just writing conditional code, defining variables, doing functions, outputting to the page, calling your functions, right? And then, updating the page. So these are very fundamental concepts that you're now getting re-exposed to in this decision process. Okay, so what's the question here? And I haven't posted, but I want you to reply. Right? So, have you used, the good practice? Would you consider using it? Just, you might consider that, right? Would you do that? Do you now understand? And how many of you, I'm curious about this, how many of you didn't even know we had a tutor for this class? Right? How many of you are on Discord? How many of you, is there a reason? And I've noticed Discord, I noticed students get on, but they don't always interact. And so I wonder about that. I wonder if it's something we should continue, because I don't see as much interaction as I hope for. And I've kind of seen that even become less over the last year or so. So maybe it's just like another thing, and it's like, no, I don't want another thing on my device. I don't want another thing to have to interact with. I get that as well, right? So you get to answer any of those particular questions. And anything else. Now this would be, and if you say no questions, I'm going to go, hey, at least give me something, because I've gone over a bit of content here. So I want to hear that you listened. That's part of what I wanted to have. Anyway, welcome to week 12. Have a great one, and I'll talk to you soon.